A lot of work has gone into Marlowe and the tools that surround Marlowe, and we are very excited to share the latest achievements with you. For example, the team has recently successfully run the first Marlowe contract on mainnet, and of course there are limitations, and there's still some way before we can see Marlowe running in day-to-day transactions. But that's why this is called Marlowe Pioneers, because you will be the first ones in trying the system before anyone else does. And for the same reason, we have put a lot of effort into making the experience as smooth as possible. But of course, there will probably be some rough edges, and we will appreciate if you let us know what those edges are so that we can improve. Also, we would like to hear what you think is useful, what you think is not useful, what is missing, what can be improved, etc., etc. So please let us know. In the next 2 weeks, Lars will be looking more in depth into the Marlowe language itself and the tools that you can use with it, but I would like to give a brief overview of the ecosystem now. There are currently three main tools. The oldest one is called Marlowe Playground, and it is an online tool that you can use from your browser, and it can be used for several things. First and most crucially, it can be used to create Marlowe contracts, and this can be done in a number of ways from within the Marlowe Playground itself. First, you can use the Marlowe language directly, and that's just text, so you can use the text editor that is built in the Marlowe Playground. But in addition to the functionalities that the text editors usually have, the Marlowe Playground text editor also has autocomplete functionalities that allow you to create a contract without almost writing any code. So you can use the mouse to choose which constructs to use where, and by the end you will pretty much have like the structure of the contract you want to do, and there's very little that needs to be typed. You can also use Blockly, which is a system that allows you to make contracts by dragging blocks like they were jigsaw puzzle pieces. And there is a more advanced technique of creating Marlowe contracts that takes advantage of existing general purpose programming languages. And with this technique, you can generate very large contracts easily by writing smaller, relatively small pieces of code. And the Marlowe Playground allows you to do this using existing languages Haskell and JavaScript, all from the browser without having to install anything. And Lars will look into these functionalities more in depth in week 4. The Marlowe Playground also has a few functionalities that help us ensure that the contracts we create do what we expect them to do. First, there is a linting mechanism, which basically automatically, as you're writing the contract, it will highlight the problems that it can find in the contract, obvious problems, and it will often make suggestions on how to fix those problems. And then there is the static analysis tools, and Marlowe Playground has 3 different static analysis tools. And it will check for working contracts that things like, for example, when you have a payment, there is enough money for making the payment, no matter which execution through the contract you do. Or, for example, whether there is pieces of code which are unreachable, because, for example, they are describing situations which cannot possibly happen. We will study this in more detail in week 6. Another way that we can make sure that the contracts do what we expect them to do is, of course, testing them. And the Marlowe Playground provides a simulator which gives you a kind of godlike perspective. So it allows you to move to the future in the simulations, so you don't have to wait for a timeout to occur in order to see what would happen if the timeout occurs. And it allows you to see the perspective of every participant. It allows you to control what every participant does, and it allows you to undo things so you can try different scenarios and make sure that every scenario does what you expect it to do. Another of the tools in the ecosystem is Marlowe Run, which allows you to actually deploy Marlowe contracts and participate in them. Until now, Marlowe Run was just another simulator which allows you to take the perspective of the participants in the contract, but the latest version of Marlowe Run allows you to actually deploy contracts and use them on-chain. Unfortunately, the latest version of Marlowe Run is not yet stable. It only allows you to run 3 built-in contracts, not any contract, and it's still not able to handle a lot of people using it at the same time. So we are still figuring out what's the best way of sharing the latest version of Marlowe Run with you. So it may not end up being just a website that you can connect to like Marlowe Playground is. We may end up having to have our local deployments of Marlowe Run in order to use them. And lastly, Marlowe CLI is another tool similar to Cardano CLI, which also allows you to deploy contracts on chain and use them. But it is more fine-grained that Marlowe run. And and on the one hand, that means that it is harder to use, but on the other hand, it means that it's more flexible, it gives you more control, and at the moment, it can also do things that Marlowe run cannot do, like running arbitrary Marlowe contracts that fit within the ledger rules. Brian will give an overview on the different ways to use Marlowe CLI on week 7. We will be making accessible a private testnet just for using in this program. And the testnet also has a faucet which can be used for obtaining test ADA in order to use the testnet. The testnet also has a copy of the Cardano Explorer that can be used to see the transactions that appear in the testnet. And there is also a custom version of Daedalus that can be used to create wallets and see your wallets in the testnet. And we will be using the testnet throughout the program, but the techniques we learn throughout the program will also be applicable, of course, to other nets like the public testnet or the mainnet. But at this point, we would strongly recommend against storing real funds in Marlowe contracts, because Marlowe hasn't been audited yet, and we are still working on making sure there are no vulnerabilities. Another particular consideration is that you shouldn't use a passphrase that you have used for a wallet that contains real ADA for a wallet in the private testnet. Always use a wallet that has been generated only for the private testnet and don't use it anywhere else. And that's all for this week. I hope you find the program interesting and that you have fun and you learn a lot with it. And again, we want to learn from you too. So please let us know your experience. Thank you for listening and see you on Tuesday on the Q&A session.